Let's begin our discussion of acid-base balance by reminding ourselves of the pH scale and what it means to be an acid and what it means to be a base. So here's the pH scale, 0 to 14. 7 is neutral, so that would be pure water. Anything below 7 would be acidic, and the lower the number, the more acidic the solution. Above 7 is basic or alkaline, and the higher the number, the more alkaline the solution. So that's the pH scale. It is logarithmic, so each unit is actually 10 times. So if we have a solution that goes from pH 4 to 3, that's a 10 times more acidic solution. So now let's talk about what it means to be an acid and what it means to be a base. So acids are proton donors. And I'll remind you that a proton is the same as a hydrogen ion. So you'll see protons and hydrogen ions meaning the same thing. So if you donate protons to the solution, that increases the concentration of the protons, and that causes the pH to go down, so you are an acid. So for example, hydrochloric acid or stomach acid releases the hydrogen ion, aka proton, into solution, and therefore it is an acid. Bases are proton acceptors, so they will remove the proton from the solution. So sodium hydroxide uses this hydroxyl ion to bind the hydrogen ion and remove it from solution. So that base will lower the amount of hydrogen ions in the solution and therefore raise the pH. So acidic solutions have a high concentration of hydrogen ions and a low pH number. Alkaline solutions have a low concentration of hydrogen ions and a high pH number. So that's what it means to be an acid and a base. So now let's look at what it means to be a buffer. Well, a buffer can be a mixture of compounds that can resist changes in the pH. Buffers are very important to have in body fluids because enzymes function best at certain pHs. And if we change the pH, these proteins might not function properly, and that might affect biochemical reactions. The most important pH range to know is our arterial blood, because that's the blood that's being distributed throughout organs, delivering oxygenated, nutrient-rich blood, and maintaining the pH of our cells. And that pH range is 7.35 to 7.45. If that pH goes above 7.45, we call that alkalosis. If the pH goes below 7.35, we call that acidosis. And there can be a number of different causes of alkalosis and acidosis. What are the main chemical buffer systems in our body? Well, the first one is the bicarbonate buffer system. This is the most important one we have in our bloodstream, helping to maintain that 7.35 to 7.45. Chemical buffers typically are a combination of a weak acid and a weak base. And in response to changes in pH, they will either release the proton into solution or remove the proton. So notice when we go this way with the reaction, we are releasing protons. So that would be how this system responds to a rise in pH. So if we have a rise in pH, but we want to maintain a pH, we can release protons. If we have a drop in pH, we can remove protons. And in essence, that will stabilize our pH. The phosphate buffer system works very similarly. It will release protons into solution to lower the pH. It'll remove protons from solution to raise the pH. And then we also have proteins that can function as buffers. Proteins can release protons from their carboxyl group, or they can bind protons using their amino group. Every protein has carboxyl groups and amino groups. So those are what we call chemical buffers. We also have what's known as the physiological buffer systems. So these are organs that can help maintain pH. And the two organs include your respiratory system, your lungs, and your kidneys, or your renal system. The physiological buffer systems act a little slower, but have a larger capacity to help maintain pH. So let's talk about the respiratory system and its involvement in pH. We did this back in the respiratory system chapter, so this is just a reminder. Your respiratory system can cause pH imbalances. If there's a condition that causes hypoventilation, for example, a COPD, where the respiratory system is struggling to get rid of carbon dioxide, that can cause respiratory acidosis because of this chemical reaction. The buildup of carbon dioxide causes the increase in hydrogen ions or protons, and therefore lowers the pH and causes acidosis. The opposite, hyperventilation, let's say someone has severe anxiety and it's causing them to hyperventilate, they will get rid of too much carbon dioxide, and that can cause respiratory alkalosis. So this is how the respiratory system could cause an acid-base imbalance. But we could also use the respiratory system to correct acid-base imbalances. So if the cause is some other cause besides respiratory system, we could use the respiratory system to fix it. So those would be metabolic causes. So if we have metabolic alkalosis, so that means we have a high pH, not because of the respiratory system, because of some other condition. The respiratory system can correct this by hypoventilating. The respiratory rate will go down, more carbon dioxide stays in the blood, and that can bring the pH back down. If there's a metabolic acidosis, the body can help compensate or correct this by hyperventilating. Respiratory rate can go up, and it can get rid of that carbon dioxide, and then the pH can rise, it can go up. So we have to make sure we understand the difference between the respiratory system potentially causing acidosis or alkalosis, or using the respiratory system to correct or compensate for a pH imbalance. The next physiological buffer system is your kidneys. And we just finished talking about kidneys. So remember, kidneys can excrete acids to prevent acidosis. They can excrete the protons to prevent acidosis. And they can retain bicarbonate to help buffer the acid. Or we might need to get rid of the buffer. So the kidneys can regulate how much bicarbonate or how much buffer we need in the bloodstream in order to regulate blood pH. So the kidneys can use as a compensatory mechanism for respiratory causes. So let's say the body is in acidosis. It could be respiratory acidosis. How might the kidneys correct this? To correct acidosis, we would want to conserve or reabsorb or generate more buffer. And that's what kidneys can do. And the kidney can get rid of the protons. So we can remove protons, and that can remove that acidity and help correct acidosis. If the body is in alkalosis, the kidneys can basically do the opposite. Get rid of some of the buffer or reabsorb the protons to acidify the blood. All right? So same with the respiratory system. Kidneys could cause acidosis and alkalosis if they're not functioning properly, or they can be used to correct pH imbalances. So let's diagnose these. So let's diagnose respiratory acidosis or alkalosis. The most important indicator is the levels of carbon dioxide. So we have to know the pH of the blood. That'll determine whether it's acidosis or alkalosis. And then we look at if there's carbon dioxide imbalance. So respiratory acidosis is caused by the accumulation of carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is above normal. The normal range is 35 to 45 millimeters mercury. So if there's high carbon dioxide and a low pH, it's respiratory acidosis, typically due to decreases in ventilation, decreases in gas exchange, some sort of respiratory ailment. Respiratory alkalosis, carbon dioxide levels are low, and when carbon dioxide levels are low, pH goes up. And that can be caused by hyperventilation. Now let's look at metabolic acidosis and alkalosis. We need to know the pH. Again, that tells us whether it's acidosis or alkalosis. But we also look at whether the carbon dioxide levels, they should be typically normal. All right. But the bicarbonate might be abnormal. Bicarbonate normal ranges is 22 to 26. So with metabolic acidosis, pH is low. That's the acidosis. Carbon dioxide levels are relatively normal, but the bicarbonate is low. What are some causes? Too much alcohol consumption can cause the production of acetic acid. Loss of buffer. That can happen during cases of extreme persistent diarrhea. Or the accumulation of lactic acid, ketosis, due to starvation or diabetic crisis, or can be caused by kidney failure. If kidneys are failing, they're not getting rid of the acids, and that can lead to metabolic acidosis. Metabolic alkalosis, pH is high, carbon dioxide levels are normal, bicarbonate levels are high. Not as common as acidosis. Most common cause is vomiting. So if you vomit up all that acid, your body becomes more alkaline. Or if you neutralize all that stomach acid, excessive use of antacids can cause metabolic alkalosis. Okay, this is the home run slide. All right, this is the slide I developed to help us understand the 4 acid-base imbalances, the causes, how to diagnose them, and what the compensatory mechanism is. So you'll notice it's basically a 4-quadrant slide. We're looking at the acidosis on the top row, alkalosis on the bottom row, respiratory is the first column, metabolic is the second column. So we first have to know some normal ranges. Blood pH, carbon dioxide levels, and bicarbonate. Given some numbers, can we diagnose the patient? Low pH, high carbon dioxide. That causes respiratory acidosis. What are some of the major causes? Hypoventilation due to COPDs, emphysema, chronic bronchitis, asthma, pneumonia, pulmonary edema, airway obstruction, and opioid overuse. Opioids will suppress the respiratory rate. How might the body compensate? Well, we can't use the respiratory system. We're going to use kidneys. Excretion of the protons, reabsorption and synthesis of more buffer. Okay, now let's look at respiratory alkalosis. High pH, low carbon dioxide. Causes: hyperventilation, could be due to anxiety, panic attacks, severe fever, pain, oxygen deficiencies, severe anemia, and stroke. How might the body compensate? Opposite of what it would do with respiratory acidosis. Instead of getting rid of more protons, we would decrease excretion, keep these in. And then we would decrease the reabsorption of the buffer. So that is the respiratory acidosis, respiratory alkalosis, and using kidneys to compensate. All right, let's look at metabolic. Metabolic acidosis, low pH, normal carbon dioxide, low bicarbonate. Causes loss of bicarbonate ions due to diarrhea, kidney failure, ketosis, vigorous exercise, excessive alcohol consumption, carbon monoxide poisoning. So diarrhea, so remember what we use bicarbonate for. We use it to buffer the small intestine, right? All that stomach acid enters the small intestine, we got to buffer it. Well, that buffer is supposed to get reabsorbed. If you have diarrhea, you just don't have the time to reabsorb that buffer, so it goes right out of the body. So severe diarrhea causes the body to lose a lot of its buffer. And if you lose buffer, you become acidic. Kidneys can cause it because kidneys are constantly getting rid of metabolic acids. And if they're not doing that, acidity accumulates. How might we fix this? We could use the respiratory system. Increase ventilation, increase breathing, gets rid of carbon dioxide, and that can help bring that pH back up. Metabolic alkalosis, often caused by excessive vomiting. So you vomit up a lot of the acid in your stomach, or you take antacids, or you have gastric suctioning, and in some cases some diuretics. So that all these could remove acid from the body. And if you're removing acids from the body, you can become too basic or alkaline. How might the respiratory system try to correct this? Our breathing rate will go down, let some of that carbon dioxide accumulate, forming acid, and hopefully bring that pH down. So those are the 4 acid-base imbalances, some of the numbers to think about, some of the causes, and then how the body compensates for these imbalances. So that's the end of this chapter. Good luck. Let me know if there's anything you need.